Today we're going to be reading starting off from Mississippi Solo, A River Quest by Eddie L. Harris. And if you guys look at this map right here, you can actually see the entire length of the Mississippi River, all the way from where it starts up here at Lake Itasca in Minnesota, all the way down here to the bottom of the United States. So today in this lesson, we are going to be learning to understand similes and metaphors in a text. And to know if you have mastered this or if you are on the right track, you need to ask yourself the following questions. So these are our success criteria. You ask yourself, can I identify similes in a text? Can I use context clues to determine their meanings? And can I use similes appropriately? And then over here you can see the same questions that we can ask ourselves about metaphors. Can I identify metaphors in a text? Can I use context clues to determine the meanings of metaphors? And can I use metaphors appropriately? So keep these in mind as we are going through the lesson, and then at the end we're going to check back and see how we did. During this lesson, you're going to need your Observing Nature Benchmark book, your Language Arts Spiral notebook, and a pencil. And once you get out your spiral notebook, you can open it up to the first fresh page, and you're going to want to start to set up your journal page. You can see that we have the title, Figurative Language, starting off. Figurative language because that is what we are working on, and starting off because that is the text that we are reading. And then up in the right-hand corner at the top, you have your name, number, today's date, which is September 10th, 2024, and the subject, which is reading. There'll be a little bit more to add to it when we are ready to really get going on those notes, which will be after we read. But for now, let's at least open up your journal, give it a title, give it a heading, and then we can get started. All right, and you can see here I have the text right here in front of me, so you can open yours up to page 12 and 13 to start. I also have set up the rest of the notes. We have 3-column notes. The first column says simile or metaphor, and in this column we're just going to identify each example of figurative language as either a simile or a metaphor. Here we have the example, and here we have a column for the meaning. So basically we'll go through as we find similes and metaphors, we will add them to the notes, and then we will always identify whether they are similes or metaphors, and we will use clues to determine the meaning. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to zoom into the text. I'm going to zoom in enough that you guys can really see what we're reading, but ultimately, even though I'm zooming in big enough for you to read on the screen, I want to make sure you have your book open and you are reading as well in your book. All right, here we go. Starting off from Mississippi Solo, A River Quest by Eddie L. Harris. In Mississippi Solo, Eddie L. Harris chronicles his adventures paddling a canoe the entire length of the Mississippi River from Minnesota to New Orleans. In this excerpt, he is just beginning his trip at Lake Itasca, the source of the river. His friend, Robinovich, has accompanied him to the lake. All right, and here we start. You can see we have the very first heading here, the lake where the river starts. Itasca, from the Latin veritas, caput, the true head, the real as opposed to any spurious source of the great river, the birth of a river, the calm before the rage. Robinovich and I have stopped the car near the park ranger's office. We need to register and pick out a campsite before dark. I don't want to. I'm too anxious to get around to the outlet of the lake where the river begins. But Robinovich, the voice of reason, insists. So, okay, we'll go register, but the campsite can wait. I want to find the river. I'm like a kid who just can't deal with the vegetables for the nagging thoughts of dessert. And that right there is a great example of figurative language. He's comparing himself to a kid who cannot deal with his vegetables because he can only think about dessert. And so he does not want the healthy thing like vegetables. He wants the delicious dessert, and he's comparing that to the way that he feels. He doesn't want to do the smart thing, which is go and register at the campsite and figure everything out. He just wants to get on the river. So you guys can see right here, I've highlighted it, and also I have a little picture just to kind of show you guys what it's talking about. Here's a kid, and he does not want those vegetables. He is dreaming of dessert, just like the author, Eddie L. Harris, does not want to go do the things he needs to do like register for the campsite. He just wants to go get on the river. All right, let's keep reading. We managed to conclude our business quickly and rush back to the little road winding around the lake another mile or so to the north. After a few quick steps down the path and through the trees, there it is. Gurgling, cooing gently, the great river is just a baby. So there we find another example of figurative language. He is referring to the river as a baby, and he uses these words gurgling, cooing gently. So those are noises that baby might make, and gurgling is also a noise that a river or a stream or a brook might make as the water is kind of going through the rocks. So he is comparing it to a baby because it's calm and the water is making these calm little noises like gurgling and cooing. All right, so you guys can see right here as well. I have another picture, a little baby. And we know that a river is not a baby, but he's just using this figurative comparison to help us understand that the river is kind of calm and safe right there. Okay, before we go any further, let's take a quick reading break and put in our first set of notes. So I'm going to put in our first example where he says he is like a kid who just can't deal with the vegetables for the nagging thoughts of dessert. Let's go ahead and write that in. Okay, you can see I put it in there. I'm like a kid who just can't deal with the vegetables for the nagging thoughts of dessert. And then we already kind of talked about the meaning. He's really anxious. He doesn't want to do the boring stuff. He just wants to get to the exciting stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in as the meaning. He's really excited for the exciting part of the trip. All right, so you can see I went ahead and added it in. I said for the meaning, the author is so excited to begin the adventure, he does not want to do the boring but responsible stuff first. So now we need to decide, is this a simile or a metaphor? So listen, if you guys remember, we've talked about this. Similes and metaphors both compare two things, but they're a little bit different because a simile is using the word like or as to compare them, but a metaphor doesn't. It just calls one thing something else. So if you look right here, simile would be something like he was as quiet as a mouse, or she swam like a fish. Whereas the metaphor just compares the two different things without using like or as. It just says something is something else. For example, Allie is a walking dictionary, or time is money. You can see in the metaphors there are no likes and there is no as. So let's go ahead and read this and see which we think it is. I am like a kid who just can't deal with the vegetables for the nagging thoughts of dessert. I see the word like, so I think this is a simile. So I'm going to go ahead, highlight like, and then I'm going to write simile in here. If you want a shortcut, you can just write S for simile or M for metaphor. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's look at the next one we had already highlighted. It says, gurgling, cooing gently, the great river is just a baby. So they are comparing the Mississippi River to a baby, or at least they're comparing the start of the Mississippi River to just a baby. So we're going to add that one in here. All right, so you can see I added it in, gurgling, cooing gently, the great river is just a baby. And I went ahead and added the meaning too because we already spoke about it. The river is calm and peaceful. So again, if you go to the descriptions, it's gurgling, it's cooing gently. The gurgling is kind of the noise that a really calm stream might be making. And cooing gently is like the sweetest little noise that a baby might be making. So both of those are describing the river as being calm and kind of peaceful, and then they describe it as a baby. Now, to decide if this is a simile or a metaphor, we know that it is comparing two different things, which they both do, right? They're comparing the great river to a baby. Now you just have to decide, did they say that it is like a baby or that it is a baby? So read it again. And you probably saw it says it is just a baby. So that means this is a metaphor. Go ahead and write it in. And again, if you want a shortcut, you can just write M for metaphor. All right, so we are going to now start reading on the next page. We're going to start going a little bit faster as well because I'm going to be doing a little bit more pausing to allow you to do some of the thinking about what the similes and metaphors mean, whether they are similes or metaphors, and then adding to the notes. Once we get to the very end of the text, I will put my notes back up on the screen to give you a chance to check your work, make sure that you caught the similes and metaphors, and see how you're doing on those meanings. All right, so let's go ahead. Around here, the lake is still a sheet of blue as the sky. Minnesota, a Dakota Indian word which means water, painted blue like the sky. Tall trees border the water and shield it from the wind. The trees rise up high but also lie upside down across the water. The lake is a mirror. I see everything twice. All right, so I see a couple of examples of figurative language. I'm going to highlight them here, and I will show you the little pictures that I found. But again, I'm hoping that you guys will take the time to kind of think about the meanings yourself, and then you can pause and add them to your note page. All right, so what did I find? I found the lake is still a sheet of blue as the sky. So you kind of have two figurative languages there, right? You see one where it says it is a sheet of blue, and then the other one says as blue as the sky. So I feel like I actually see a metaphor and a simile. Interesting. I know I said I'd be leaving some of this to you, but I'll ease you in slowly so that it's not too much. And then if you guys look right here, I've got a blue sheet or a sheet of blue fabric right there. So you can kind of get the idea when they say the lake is still a sheet of blue as the sky. All right, and then right here you can see the lake is a mirror. The lake is a mirror. We know it's not actually literally a mirror, so what do we think that means? Here is my image that I have. I have a picture of a lake. You guys can see that. I'm going to zoom in for you guys just so you can see it a little bit better. So you can see right here is the water, and then this is right here kind of the bank of the river. That's the edge of the river, and you can see some trees. I also see the trees in the water. Is that because they're actually in the water or because the lake is reflecting the trees into the water? So it looks like they're in there, but it's really just a reflection. And then here's a mirror, and what do we know about mirrors? What do we see in the mirrors? We see our reflection. So you see the lake is reflecting the trees just like a mirror would reflect whatever is looking into it. So we discussed it, but we've not actually put it into our notes yet. That is for you guys. I'm going to remind you. Let me zoom out. I'll zoom back in a moment, but you can pause and you can take the two figurative language examples that we just went over and pop them into your notes, okay? So right in here, you're going to go ahead and put them in your notes. Also, at any point, if you run out of room on your paper, feel free, turn to the next page, and you can just recreate these same columns, the 3-column notes. Just draw a long line down, another one, and a line at the top, okay? All right, let's get back into the reading. Paragraph 6. A cloud of loons skirts low over the surface of the lake, then lifts high and banks around the bend out of sight. Their cries are loud and wild. And I see another example right here. It says a cloud of loons. And we learned when we read before that loons are birds, kind of like ducks. You can see loons right here. But it says a cloud of loons. When I picture a cloud, I picture like a cloud in the sky, right? Like this. But they're talking about a bunch of these birds flying together in the sky. So I want you to think about, what does that mean? And then it's calling the loons a cloud of loons. It doesn't say they were like a cloud. It says they are a cloud of loons. So to me, that sounds a little bit like a metaphor again. And you can go ahead, put it into the notes, and write down what you think the meaning is. All right, let's keep reading. Paragraph 7. The sun is going down. Shadows are long. Everything is swathed in hues of yellow and gold. Along the edge where the lake is shallow, marsh grass grows the color of rippling wheat and creates a fake shoreline extending out 10 yards or so. It looks solid and thick enough to walk on, but it's not. All right, I did not see anything there. So make sure that you guys take a minute, add anything you need to your notes, and then we'll go ahead and keep reading. So pause if you need to, and then when you're ready, push play. All right, we are on paragraph 8 now. And just south of those golden reeds, the bank of the lake turns in, receding like an old man's hairline. Big rocks stretch across the opening, almost as if to stop the flow, but there's no stopping this spill. The little flow of water which babbles playfully over these rocks is the start of something, like a snowball down a mountain, like the storming of the Bastille, like a great upheaval whose time has come. All right, so we have a couple of different examples here. I'm going to highlight them for you. We see right here that the bank of the lake turns in, receding like an old man's hairline. So we talked about that a little bit in class. We talked about how you could have the shape of the lake or the bank of the lake kind of goes like that, and then you can see the kind of outline of the older man's receding hairline. It's kind of similar, right? So when you add that to your notes, you have this picture to kind of help you visualize. And again, something I do want to make sure you guys notice is it says it's receding like an old man's hairline. I know I haven't been paying attention to the likes or lack thereof on all the examples, but that one sticks out to me. So that tells us this one is a simile. So when you add that to your notes, you can go ahead and label it as a simile, but I do still need you to figure out the meaning. All right, the other figurative language that I found is they were talking about the flow of water. You guys can see that right here, which babbles playfully over the rocks, is the start of something, like a snowball down a mountain, like the storming of the Bastille, like a great upheaval whose time has come. And all three of those are different similes, but I'm only going to choose one, like a snowball down a mountain. Again, I see the word like. So we know that's a simile. And you guys can see right here, I've got a snowball down a mountain. We talked about this in class too. It kind of starts small, but as it goes down the mountain and collects more snow, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So think about what that might mean for the river. All right, paragraph 9, let's read. The greatest river in the world. The Ojibwe Indians call this river Mississippi, the Great River. Other tribes call it Father of Waters. The Volga has been called the Russian Mississippi. The Murray-Darling has been called the Mississippi of Australia. But the Mississippi is compared to none. It is the yardstick, the standard for greatness. And here, it is just a creek. I stand on the rocks and feel mighty. My shoes don't even get wet. A child could walk safely across here. All right, so see if you can find the figurative language, either the simile or the idiom here. I'm not going to highlight this one for you. However, I will go ahead and show you the picture as a reminder. So here's a picture to remind you what was that figurative language we saw here. We discussed it as well during class, so hopefully you remember. If not, you can quietly ask a neighbor, but try to figure that one out, and you are going to highlight it here, and then you are also going to add it to your notes. All right, let's keep reading. Paragraph 10. Maybe 10 feet wide, about 12 inches deep, clear and clean enough to be drinkable. The creek bed is pebbly. The river is not at all a muddy monster that rolls by St. Louis. It hardly seems even a distant relative. I leave the river with a casual wave. See you tomorrow. It's nearly dark now and time to make camp. So up here it says the river is not at all the muddy monster that rolls by St. Louis. So he calls the river a muddy monster. He doesn't call the part of the river he's at a muddy monster, but he's talking about when the Mississippi is kind of in full force, it looks like a muddy monster. So let's go ahead, look at the image here. You guys can see I have two pictures. One is of a big muddy monster, which that is definitely not what the Mississippi River literally is. But you can see in this picture, this is actually part of the Mississippi River. And you can see it looks very muddy. So when he calls it the muddy monster, I'm guessing that it's because it's very muddy looking and it's very big. So go ahead, you can pause, you can add this metaphor to your notes. Make sure you add in the meaning, and let's read this last section. We still have about a page and a half, but we are in the last section. It has its own new subheading, called The Buck, and let's go ahead and read. Paragraph 13. Pitching camp is a breeze. Modern tents are so simple, especially the one that I've bought. I could set it up in 5 minutes in the dark. And in fact, I was so quick getting it up and done with, Robinovich and I had time for a leisurely stroll in the woods before dark. The shimmering reflections darkening on the lake faded into the dusk. The wind fell to a breeze. The evening stilled to the quiet time that is perfect for strolls hand in hand and for silent thinking. And if you guys look right here, I'm going to use a different color to highlight this, but I saw some more figurative language. It says right here, pitching camp is a breeze. Now, it's not literally a breeze. It's not a little gust of air, but that means that it's easy. Now, I did that a different color. All of our similes and metaphors have been green, but this I highlighted in blue because it is not a simile or a metaphor, and you actually don't have to put it on your notes unless you want to, but this is an idiom. We've talked about idioms before. An idiom is figurative language that has a very different meaning than what the literal words say. So again, when it says pitching camp is a breeze, it doesn't mean it's a literal little gust of wind. It just means that it's easy. So there we go. Pitching camp is a breeze. This one's optional. If you want to put it in your notes, you can, but you don't have to. And let's go ahead and go to the final page. Suddenly, let me zoom in a little more for you. There you go. Suddenly, a pounding. The earth trembled. It sounded like a heavy fist slamming quickly against a punching bag, then stopped. It startled us. I looked but saw nothing. Then the pounding came again, and a huge buck bounded out of nowhere, emerging from the trees to stop and eye us. His antlers stuck up from his head like a TV antenna. He lowered them and charged straight at us, his hooves thumping the cold, hard ground and creating that frightening sound of thunder. Neither Robinovich or I budged a muscle. Threatening as he was still too wonderful to take our eyes from. Better to be gored to death by a TV antenna than to miss such effortless athletics. All right, listen, we have two different figurative language examples here. The first one, I'm going to show you the picture. I've got a punching bag being punched. And right up here, it says it sounded like a heavy fist slamming quickly against a punching bag. All right. And it's talking about the pounding. The pounding sounded like a heavy fist slamming quickly against a punching bag. And we found out what that pounding actually was. It is the buck, which let me show you right there. That is a buck. But it was the buck running, and it was so loud they could hear the pounding of the earth, and it actually says that it seemed like the earth trembled. Maybe it actually did shake a little bit. So the first simile is like a heavy fist slamming quickly against a punching bag, and then there was one more, and it was talking about how his antenna. Or I'm sorry, not his antenna. It was talking about how his antlers, were like a TV antenna. And I know our TVs these days don't have this kind of antenna anymore, but that's what they used to look like, and that's what his antlers looked like. So you can see right there. So let me go ahead. I will highlight that one for you as well. His antlers stuck up from his head like a TV antenna. And you can see the comparison right there between the TV, the antenna, and the buck's antlers. All right, let's finish this. His running turned to leaping, and just at the very last second, he sprang to his left and darted out of sight, triumphant. The pounding came from inside of my chest now. I was breathing hard. Life in the woods, I thought. All right, and that is actually the end of the text. I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys too. It kind of makes me want to read the entire thing because if you guys remember, this is just an excerpt from his essay. But what I want for you guys now is to make sure that your notes are done, and then you guys can check them by looking at mine. All right, here you can check your notes. I'm going to read through them quickly, but you can also pause and zoom in and see if there's anything that you need to add or change on yours. All right, so if you see, I'm going to skip the first two. We've already done them. I have right here in red, the lake is a still sheet of blue as the sky. And I actually labeled that as a metaphor and a simile. The first half is a metaphor. It is a still sheet of blue. And then the second half, as blue as the sky, is a simile, and it just means the water was very blue. All right, the second one, a cloud of loons. That's a metaphor. It's not saying it's like a cloud of loons. It's just saying it is a cloud of loons. And there were so many of those birds flying together that it kind of looked like a cloud. All right, in green, receding like an old man's hairline. It's a simile, you've got like, and it just meant that the bank of the lake curved inward, kind of in the same shape as a hairline. All right, like a snowball down a mountain. That is a simile. You can see the word like. It's comparing the snowball and the mountain, or it's comparing, the river growing the way a snowball grows as it goes down a mountain. So I just said the river gets larger as it goes. Maybe it even picks up speed, right? Just like the snowball. The muddy monster is a metaphor, and it's just saying the Mississippi River is huge and muddy. This one here, this was the idiom. This one was optional. You did not have to put it in if you didn't want to. But pitching camp is a breeze. That just means it's easy. All right, next, sounded like a heavy fist slamming quickly against a punching bag. And it was talking about when the deer was running. So I said the hooves hitting the ground sounded loud and forceful, kind of like the sound of a fist hitting a punching bag. And finally, the last simile, we've got his antlers stuck up from his head like a TV antenna, and it just means the antlers were tall and they stuck straight up. All right, guys, listen. That's it. Hopefully you got something out of this. I'm hoping you enjoyed finishing the text. I'm hoping also that you were able to really get to know these similes and metaphors and how they were used in the text. Not only is it kind of just a fun and quirky way of writing something, of making a comparison, but it also helps us to really visualize and imagine what the author is talking about. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and we're going to continue working with similes and metaphors and figurative language throughout the year. So hopefully the more we look at it, the more comfortable you will be, and then not only will you recognize it in writing and be able to know what it means, but also start using it on your own. All right, let's double check our success criteria and see how we did. So again, we are learning to understand similes and metaphors in a text. Did we identify them in the text? Yes, that's similes and metaphors. Did we use clues to determine the meanings of the similes and metaphors? Yep. Have we been using them already? No, so that is something we still need to do. But I feel great about identifying them and using context clues to determine their meanings, and now we just need to start working on using them ourselves. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and good job.